Hello and welcome to Infocus. I'm Bradley Valenaki. In September, the country will turn 46 years old. Looking back on how far the country has come, many people still ask why services are not reaching them after 46 years. And of course, we tend to ask what the problem is and what has gone wrong in the government service delivery and the mechanisms involved. Understanding this and the issues behind this, the government's think tank hopes to discuss this in a project focused on autonomy and decentralization of government in Papua New Guinea. My guest in the studio is respected senior researcher, Dr. Thomas Webster from the National Research Institute. Sir, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Bradley, and thank you for allowing me to be here to talk on this important subject.
Of course. All right, so autonomy and decentralization are two big words, but in this context, make our people understand.
Thank you, Bradley. And autonomy is a form of decentralized government. It's to one extreme, autonomy means that the subnational governments have a degree of independent self-government in making decisions and having representation, apart from the national government. And so we have our provincial government system. They are a form of autonomous, but federalism is one end of the extreme, where the states are quite strong and independent in many ways, and then the next form is autonomy. So it's a degree of decentralized form of government. And I think I'd like to start off by coming back to the question you had, why our service delivery is still a question and issue. And our constitution, our founding fathers put it into the constitution saying that the delivery of basic services and participation in government will be a challenge given our diversity and us. And so the second national goal and directive principles actually call for the arrangements of government to have a strong decentralized flavor so that people's needs and aspirations can be captured within those government framework.
So from the start, when the country came into being, we already acknowledged the differences we had.
Yeah, indeed. And so geographically, there are swamps, mountains, and so communities and people are quite separated in distances. In some areas, they're close together, so service delivery and institutions of government are easy to install and put in place. In other areas, it's huge challenges. So they recognize that a central national government could not be able to respond effectively. So the call for decentralized forms of government. And we've gone through about 3 different reforms in trying to address or have effective decentralized systems of government. The first one was in 1976, immediately after independence, and the Constitutional Planning Committee had recommended for a system, and so that provincial and local level government system came into effect in 1977, and we had a premier-style system where there were provincial assemblies, and in about 5 provinces, they elected the premiers directly from the electorate, but in the other provinces, they had them elected by the provincial assembly. And so that was the executive government, and they worked quite effectively to some degrees. However, they were also seen as challenges to the national members of parliament who felt that these provincial governments were more effective in delivering services, and so their role in responding to the needs of the electorate were not so visible. And so there was a move to, and of course, some provincial governments did mismanage funds, and so there was issues around mismanagement of funds. They suspended several provincial governments in those days. And so in 1995, there was a strong push by government, particularly the backbenchers of government who felt that they were always challenged at the polls when they went to stand for elections. The local members of parliament or assembly in the provincial governments were seen to be delivering government services, and the question would be asked by the committee, and so what do you do? And so the national members of parliament, and from our analysis, that sort of reflects that reason why the national parliament moved to change the previous provincial government system. And in 1995, effectively, the organic law provided for the national members of parliament to be members of the provincial assemblies. So the original members of the original members effectively became governors, and the open members were the nominated members of the provincial assemblies, along with the presidents of the local level government councils. So we've had a nominated provincial government system since 1995. However, that still has not delivered sort of the expected benefits that we were seeing. And so in 2014, the government passed the the District Development Authority. And so the District Development Authority is now seen as taking the responsibility for delivering basic services at the district level, at the subnational level effectively. However, there are problems with that. I mean, there are many people who express concern, saying we are still missing out on this government services, and some saying, oh, we want new electorates so that our needs can be effectively met. Others are saying, how will we now, who will hear us? And so there is this concern. And effectively, there was a government report, the Constitutional Law Reform Commission and the provincial and local level government department. They undertook a report in 2014 and delivered a report in 2015, which clearly says the organic law in 1995 and the different sort of reforms that have been introduced since are clearly not working. And so we need to have a review of the current arrangements and make sure that we have an effective decentralized form of government.
So Dr. Webster, in a nutshell, probably in 5 minutes' time, you have told us about the various changes that have eventuated since independence in Papua New Guinea. And we're still on that road of discovery. We
still haven't found that magic arrangement. And so that's why we now want to have this conversation. And the National Research Institute has set up this research project saying, look, let's review where we have come from. What are the lessons that we can learn? What can we learn from other countries that have similar challenges and have undertaken reforms to improve their situation? And so we try to learn from those experiences and come up with a more effective decentralized system of government.
Dr. Thomas Webster from the National Research Institute. We'll take a short break and come back on the other side with more of the discussions. Hello, thank you for joining us once more on Infocus for discussions on autonomy and decentralization, a research project by the NRI. Dr. Webster, like you've said before the break, there have been many changes trying to find the right balance for a system of government that works for us in Papua New Guinea in terms of this decentralization. And with the changes, you've seen politicians involved in this, plus also on the with the legal bodies that are with government legal agencies working alongside them. Now you have the NRI as a partner on this. How do you think this will contribute to the outcome of such important research?
Thank you, Bradley. What we would like to do is bring the research information available around studies that have been done on autonomy and decentralization and help that to inform our discussions. And so our objective is to facilitate an informed conversation on issues around autonomy and decentralization of government and bring out those issues and have some honest debate and discussions about what are the issues, what are the potential for improvement, and then our plan for moving forward. As I said, we are planning for a national conference in October, the first week of October, where we would like academics, practitioners, politicians, and civic society to come together and discuss about issues affecting decentralized government systems in Papua New Guinea. Decentralization and autonomy of governments are not unique to Papua New Guinea. These are issues that are affecting developed countries as well as developing countries. And there have been a lot of work and studies done outside of PNG. So what we would like to do is bring some of those research work that's been done to help inform and help us analyze our situation here. And so we would be able to do that through bringing those studies on board to inform us and providing a framework which we are going to use in order to analyze the issues This framework has been developed from work done out externally, from an analysis of autonomous government or decentralized government arrangements in other parts of the world. And they outlined that these are the main issues through which, or lenses or eyes through which to see those issues, have the in-depth discussions, and be able to put recommendations forward on that. What we hope to do is that after this analysis and informed discussions, we will have a better understanding among our key policymakers in government, our politicians and so on, about what are the issues that is affecting our effective decentralization and governance and also delivery of basic services, and give us some ideas about moving forward in terms of appropriate institutional governance structures. And those are the two objectives. We will engage in a series of activities up to the national conference. In every fortnight, we are hosting a conference or a seminar at NRI to start to introduce some of those subjects and issues. And so in the period leading up to the conference, the seminars will try to provide a background information on what changes or what reforms were implemented in PNG during the past 20 or 46 years of independence, how they may have fared, what are some of the issues, and how we might analyze and understand and then look at better ways of improving or better ways of arranging government.
All right. So, Dr. Webster, looking at the changes over time, the national government has, through the different forms of decentralization over the years, transferred power down to the provincial governments. From the provincial governments, recently in 2014, I think, the powers were again transferred down in as far as the districts are concerned through the DDAs. NRI has done some work on that as well. From the research material available, is it working for us?
Clearly, thank you for that. The NRI commissioned a study in 2016 that was conducted in 2017 around the effectiveness of the district development authorities and the provincial governments. And the DDA Act was approved in 2014. Clearly, it's still a work in progress, but the observations were that it needs time to implement those and in order to realize the benefits. But at the early stage, they were saying there's still a lot of things to be sorted out, and so they were not working as effectively as desired. That's the story of reforms in decentralizing government. We started off in 1976 with the first provincial government system. We were not happy with that as things were progressing, and then we replaced it in 1995. And we're not happy with the way things were going from the 1995 reforms, and introduced the 2014 DDA Act to improve on that. And clearly, that's also having some dissatisfaction, and we want to have new electorates or additional electorates, and also now that this report, the CLRC report, and the provincial department, the provincial and local level government, clearly saying that those reforms and the organic law is clearly inappropriate. It's not working, and so we need a new organic law, a new way of looking at the institutional arrangements. The lessons from abroad provide a framework, and so the framework. It's important to look at that framework because when we start to introduce reforms, we're introducing reforms in just one area, and there are other areas that impact also, and we don't look at those areas. So we need to look at it in a more holistic way, and that's where we would like to frame our discussions around. And so there are 5 areas that we would like to frame the discussions around. The first area is around the representation issues. What sort of arrangement would like to have, and what sort of literature is out there that informs us on arrangements for people to elect their representatives to discuss issues that affect them at the national level as well as the subnational level. The second area is around sharing of powers and functions. What sort of powers and functions should a national government have? What should the subnational government have? In our case, what sort of powers should provincial governments have? What sort of powers should provincial districts, development authorities have? What sort of powers and functions and responsibilities should local level governments have? And so we need to have discussions around that so that it's very clear who's responsible for what. The third area of discussion that we need to focus around is on entrenchment and managing intergovernmental relations. It's clearly evident from international experiences that establishing decentralized forms of governments take time to mature. And in some countries, it takes more than 50 years to implement and make sure that everything that has been desired is put into place. And in PNG, what we've done is 10 to 15 years, we're not happy with the system. We say we chuck it out and try a new system. And it would need to take time to mature. And it also requires institutions and laws to make sure that whatever we have agreed to is implemented in an effective way and sequenced correctly over time. And so that's what we call entrenchment and intergovernment relations that we need to have a look at. The fourth area is the important area around financing. We need to have some agreements around how do you finance subnational government arrangements? What's a formula for transferring grants from national level to provincial governments and to district level? Should it be shared equally? And equally, like in our current case, it's 10 million kina to every district. Is it fair? Because cost of delivery of services in some provinces or in some districts are much, much higher than in other areas. So what's an equitable mechanism to do that? Under finance also, there's issue around taxation. Who collects taxes and who disburses taxes? So that, like VAT or the value-added tax, if the national government is collecting it and it's being collected from provinces and district level, how much should go back to the districts and the provinces and how much should be kept by the national government? And so that's around the fiscal arrangements. The fifth area and the final area is an important area around implementation. If we agree on, on those parameters and we say we want to have reforms in this area, we need to have a plan for implementing it. And what are the institutions that will take responsibility for implementing it? And so a lot of I'm reading through and I'm thinking through a lot of the reforms that happen in PNG. We have not effectively implemented those reforms. In 1976, we were halfway through implementing and we didn't implement most of it and we said, we're not happy and we changed them. So what we need to do is recognize that it takes time to implement and for those institutions to mature, and also that we need to plan so that some things will happen first, some things will happen next, and so on. And then who's going to take charge of making sure that it's implemented? Parliament is a 5-year cycle. But important reforms such as decentralization will take 10 to 20 years. So we need an institution of government that will oversee and make sure that these changes are continuing and being implemented right through. So those 5 areas provide the parameters around which we would need to look at our experiences in the past. Are they, are the areas that we worked on, are they appropriate? Are the institutions of representation that we have, are they appropriate? Do we need to change? How effectively are they working? Are the division of powers and functions very clear? And do people know who is responsible for what? And then hold the relevant authorities accountable. We need accountable systems of government so that we know who is responsible for a piece of road, who is responsible for a health center, so that and the operations of that health center, so that that level of government can be held accountable. At the moment, it's very difficult to place responsibility and accountability. And so once we have those things and they're very clear, then start to have the implementation of that. So I guess what we're doing is we're providing a framework based on the international literature and saying research done elsewhere inform us that these are the areas to look at. What does the research say about those particular areas, the 5 areas, and help us to look back over the past 46 years and where we have traveled. How can we, what are the things that have gone wrong? What are the options and possibilities for improvements? And then plan a new course for the future.
All right. So Dr. Webster, clarity on responsibilities and of course, checks and balance mechanisms, very important in delivering these fundamental policies for our country, Papua New Guinea. We'll take a short break and come back on the other side with more of the discussions. You're watching Infocus. Welcome back. Still on the discussions around autonomy and decentralization, a project by the National Research Institute. Dr. Webster, some real questions now people are asking about the push for splitting the big electorates here in Papua New Guinea. Do we need more electorates, or do we need a better coordinated, decentralized service delivery system? Your comments.
Thank you. I guess, and it's interesting as I work on this project and I read through, and then the constitutional, the Electoral Boundaries Commission is also doing the rounds in terms of, visiting the provinces and regions, and most electorates are really big. I mean, under the current system, where we've agreed that these electorates are the mechanisms through which basic services delivery is going to be conducted, it's clear that the electorates are too large. You have some electorates, and we had a talkback show recently, and there was a caller from Middle Rambo, and I make reference to that because the Middle Rambo, he explained, is that there are 3 local level government areas in that region, and if the member comes from one of those local level government councils, the other 2 local level government council areas get ignored in the process, and that's not unique to Middle Rambo. I know it happens in most other electorates of the country, and so if we want to have an effective delivery mechanism, I guess we had to split the electorates into smaller electorates, because clearly our regions, as I pointed out, as we all recognize, is isolated communities divided by rivers, mountains, and so on. And so some of those electoral boundaries, the boundaries of the districts, are quite challenging for members of parliament to try to go to that. But if we were to have an effective subnational government and strong provincial government systems to provide basic services, and so have smaller electorates that break current electorates up into 3 or 4 groups that could then have electorates to a provincial assembly, those provincial assemblies could. The representatives from those areas would be able to communicate with people in the locality, understand their needs, and bring the issues effectively to that second level government. And if we were able to give it the appropriate powers, give it the appropriate funds, and so on, then they would be more responsive. And I worked during the time that the first provincial government system was working at that time, and the premiers were in charge of the government, of the executive government in the provinces, and I saw that they were quite effective in the way that they responded to issues. And I was living next to a provincial government member, and it would be interesting to see the councillors walking in the morning and say, before you go off to Mount Hagen for your meeting with the premier, just wanted to let you know that there was a flooded river that overnight that washed away a bridge, and we need someone to come and fix it. Or we had a landslip and it's blocked the road, or a classroom, there's in this context. So these members of parliament were more close to the people in the locality, maybe spoke the same language or within the same cultural group. And so they were more effective in representing their needs as in terms of engaging in government, as well as responding to the basic services needs.
So more or less the people felt that the government was with them.
With them. And that's effectively what a subnational government, an effective subnational government would do. And so we need to have that discussion, and that it's good that it's happening at this point in time. So we can say, look, do you want more national government electorates where the national MPs, we elect them to the national parliament, and then they work through the district development authorities to deliver the basic services in terms of health, looking after roads, looking after schools and so on? Or should we have a second-tier government that's strong and effective, elected through with a strong legislative assembly that can look after those basic services, basic needs, and we have a national level government that takes care of only the national government issues and national functions and responsibilities? Like in many other countries, what they do is they let the national government deal with national issues of currency, foreign affairs, defense, and so forth, and let the second-tier and third-tier governments, like local-level government councils, deal with basic service delivery. But in those the institutional arrangements are quite clear. They make sure that the responsibilities are and the functional areas of government decision making is quite clear, so that people know who's responsible for what. And together with that comes the resource allocation and making the national government, it's bound by laws and the organic or strong constitutional laws to transfer funds in an effective and an equitable manner to the sub-national government, so that they have enough resources to meet the needs of the people. Yeah.
Nowadays, when you want to implement something, you have to have the resource backing.
Yeah.
Dr. Webster, we've come to the end of our discussions, fruitful discussions around, the powers and functions of government, politics, administration, all of that in the mix. But discussions around autonomy, decentralization. So we wish you all the best in the coming forum.
Thank you, Bradley, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to come and talk about these issues on this show.
All right. If you have comments on tonight's program or would like to be part of the discussion, you can email us on the email now showing, or you can engage with us on our social media pages and watch this program a little later on YouTube. From all of us here, stay safe. Bye-bye.